There is a cave in the hills of Hebron, and it is older than almost anything you have ever touched. Go down into the dark, past the place where the daylight stops, and you come to a chamber cut into limestone 4,000 years ago. Inside it, tradition says, lie 4 couples. For husbands, for wives, the founding family of an entire people laid side by side in the rock, waiting. Abraham is there, and beside him, Sarah. Isaac is there, and beside him, Rebekah. Jacob is there, and beside him, Leah. You count them on your fingers in the dark, for men, and you wait for the 4th wife to complete the pattern. Jacob had 2 wives, everybody knows that. The famous one, the beautiful one, the one he worked 14 years to marry. But she is not here. Rachel, the wife Jacob loved, the wife every Sunday school flannel board puts at the center of the story, is not in the tomb. She is buried somewhere else entirely, alone, by the side of a road. And the reason she is missing from that cave is one of the strangest, quietest reversals in the whole book of Genesis. We are going to get to that road, but not yet, because here is what most people miss. When you read the book of Genesis, you are told it is the story of the fathers. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the patriarchs, the men whose names God attaches to his own, the God of Abraham, of Isaac, of Jacob. And so you read it as a story about 3 men and the God who called them. But that is not the whole story. And once you see the other half, you cannot unsee it. This is not a story about women who stood in the background while the men did the important things. This is not a story about wives as footnotes to their famous husbands. This is not a story about who married whom in a dusty genealogy you skip to get to the good part. This is a story about the fact that the covenant, the promise that would build a nation, produce a kingdom, and lead all the way to a manger in Bethlehem, ran, at every single generation, straight through a woman the world had written off. The barren one, the unloved one, the deceived one, the overlooked one, the second choice. At every link in the chain, God reached past the obvious and chose the woman nobody would have bet on. And he did it so consistently, so deliberately, that by the time you finish counting, you realize it was never an accident. It was the pattern. It was the point. There were more than 4 of them. There were more than 5. And the ones history remembers least turn out to be the ones the whole nation was, quite literally, built on. So let's go back to the beginning of the pattern, to an old woman standing behind a tent door, listening to a stranger promise her the one thing her body had failed to give for 90 years. And laughing. Her name was Sarai, and for most of her life it meant a wound. She was beautiful. The text says, so plainly, and it says it more than once, beautiful enough that kings noticed her, beautiful enough that her own husband was afraid of what powerful men might do to have her. But beauty was not the thing her world measured a woman by. Her world measured her by children, and Sarai had none. You have to sit in that for a moment to feel it. In the ancient Near East, a woman without a child was not simply disappointed. She was, in the eyes of everyone around her, a failure at the one thing she existed to do. Every barren year was a public verdict. And Sarai carried that verdict not for a year, not for a decade, but for the better part of a century. Then a strange God spoke to her husband and made a promise, so large it bordered on absurd. Your descendants, he said, will outnumber the stars. Through you, all the families of the earth will be blessed. Through you, through the man married to the woman who could not have a single child. The years went by. Abraham turned 90. Sarai turned 89. And the promise just sat there, unfulfilled, getting more ridiculous with every birthday. So she did what a desperate woman in her culture did. She gave her husband her servant, a woman named Hagar, and told him to have the child through her instead. It was a solution. It was also a catastrophe, one that would tear the household apart, because the promise was never meant to run through a workaround. It was meant to run through Sarai. And then one afternoon, 3 visitors came to the tent under the oaks. And one of them said the impossible out loud. This time next year, Sarah will have a son. She was standing behind the tent door when she heard it. 90 years old. And she laughed. It was not a happy laugh. It was the laugh of a woman who has been disappointed so many times that hope itself has become a kind of joke. After I am worn out, she said to herself, and my Lord is old also, shall I now have pleasure? It is one of the most human lines in the entire Bible. Behind the tent door, alone, the old woman laughs at God. And here is the detail almost everyone races past. When the son finally came, when the impossible actually happened, God told them what to name him. And the name he chose was Yitzhak, Isaac. In Hebrew, it means he laughs. Think about what that does. The name of the child, who would carry the entire covenant forward, the father of Jacob, the grandfather of the 12 tribes, is a permanent memorial to the moment his mother laughed at the promise she was about to receive. Every time anyone said that boy's name for the next 4,000 years, they were repeating Sarah's laugh. The bitter laugh became a joyful one. God has made me to laugh, she said, when he was born, and all who hear will laugh with me. That is the first link in the chain. The covenant did not run through the beautiful woman because she was beautiful, or through the strong woman because she was strong. It ran through the barren woman, the one whose body had said no for 90 years, precisely, so that no one could ever mistake the child for a human achievement. Isaac was not a triumph of biology. He was a gift dropped into the lap of a woman the world had already counted out. But it gets more interesting, because the pattern doesn't stop with Sarah. It sharpens. When Isaac grew up, it was time for him to marry, and Abraham refused to let his son take a wife from the Canaanites around them. So he sent his oldest servant on a long journey back to the old country to find a bride. The servant arrived at a well outside the city at evening, exhausted, with 10 thirsty camels, and he prayed a very specific prayer. Let the right woman be the one who not only gives me a drink, but offers to water all my camels too. Now understand what that request actually meant. 10 camels, after a long journey, can drink something like 250 liters of water. Drawing that by hand, jar by jar, from a deep well, is not a polite gesture. It is backbreaking labor that could take an hour or more. The servant was not praying for a pretty girl. He was praying for a woman of staggering generosity and strength. Her name was Rebekah, and before he had even finished the prayer, she was already lowering her jar, already offering him a drink, already saying the words, I will draw water for your camels also, until they have done drinking. She ran. The text keeps using that word. She ran to the well. She ran to fill the trough. A young woman, doing the work of a servant for a stranger she had never met, because it was the kind thing to do. But that is not the moment that makes Rebekah extraordinary. The moment comes later, when the servant explained who he was and why he had come, that he wanted to take her hundreds of miles away, to a land she had never seen, to marry a man she had never met. Her family stalled. Stay 10 days, they said. Let her think about it. And then they did something almost unheard of in that world. They asked her, will you go with this man? A young woman in the ancient Near East was not usually asked whether she consented to a marriage. Her father decided. Her brother decided. But here, at the hinge of the entire covenant story, the narrator stops everything and lets a woman speak for herself. And her answer is 3 words in English, 2 in Hebrew, and it changes the trajectory of the whole promise. I will go. She did not know Isaac. She did not know the land. She did not know that the twins in her future would divide into 2 nations, or that the younger of them would be renamed Israel. She knew almost nothing, and she said yes anyway, and got up and left everything she had ever known to walk toward a promise she could not yet see. Stay with me, because here is the pattern already tightening. Sarah's story was about a woman God chose despite what her body couldn't do. Rebekah's story is about a woman who chose, who stepped into the covenant of her own free will, with her own voice, when she could have stayed home safe. The promise is not just landing on these women. It is running through their courage, their generosity, their yes. 2 links in the chain now. And we haven't even reached the sisters yet, the 2 women whose rivalry would build an entire nation, and whose story contains the reversal I promised you back at that cave. So stop and look at what we have so far. 2 generations in, and a pattern is already showing its face. The God of Genesis keeps building his promise through the woman you would not have picked. the barren one, the one who had to choose it herself, out loud, when no one would have blamed her for staying home. Not the powerful, not the obvious, the overlooked. If that pattern is landing for you, if you have ever felt like the one who gets skipped over while everyone else seems chosen, then do me a quick favor before we go on. Subscribe so the next time we unpack a story like this, it finds you. And leave a comment with the name of the wife whose story has hit you hardest so far. I read them, and I promise you the best reversal is still coming. Because now we come to the sisters. And this is where it gets remarkable. Rebekah's son Jacob grew up and ran for his life. He had cheated his brother out of a blessing, and his brother wanted him dead. So he fled north to the old country, the same region his mother had come from, to stay with his uncle Laban. And on the way, tired and alone, with a stone for a pillow, he saw a ladder reaching into heaven and heard the covenant spoken over him too. The promise was moving to the third generation. It just needed a wife to run through. He found her at a well. Of course he did. This family keeps meeting its future at wells. Her name was Rachel, and Jacob loved her the moment he saw her. The text is almost cinematic about it. He rolled the stone off the well's mouth for her flocks, and he kissed her, and he wept out loud, overwhelmed. He agreed to work 7 years for her hand, and the Bible says those 7 years seemed to him but a few days for the love he had to her. That is one of the great love lines in all of literature. 7 years felt like a week because he was looking at her. But Rachel had an older sister. Her name was Leah, and the Bible introduces the two of them with one devastating sentence. Leah was tender-eyed. But Rachel was beautiful and well-favored. Tender-eyed. In Hebrew, the word is racket. Scholars have argued about it for 3,000 years. Did it mean her eyes were weak? Soft? Dull? Delicate? Nobody is entirely sure. But here is what everybody agrees on. It was said in contrast. Whatever racket meant, it meant not like her sister. Leah is introduced to us the way she must have felt her whole life, as the one who was compared and came up short. The one whose single described feature was a thing that made people look away toward the prettier girl standing next to her. And then it got worse. On the wedding night, after the 7 years, Laban did something monstrous. Under the veil, in the dark, he swapped his daughters. He sent Leah into the tent instead of Rachel. And Jacob, the man who had once disguised himself to steal a blessing meant for his brother, woke up in the morning next to the wrong sister. The deceiver had been deceived. But sit with Leah for a moment, because everybody rushes past her to feel sorry for Jacob. Imagine being her. Imagine being handed to a man in the dark, knowing full well he thinks you are someone else. Imagine the sun coming up and watching his face change from love to horror when he realizes it is you. Imagine being the wife a man got tricked into. That was the first morning of Leah's marriage, and it more or less became the shape of her entire life. Jacob worked another 7 years to get Rachel too, and the Bible says it flatly, without softening it. He loved Rachel more than Leah. Leah was, in the text's own brutal word, hated, unloved, married, but not wanted. And here is the part nobody tells you. When the Lord saw that Leah was hated, that is the exact phrase, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. Stop and feel the weight of that. In a household organized entirely around who Jacob loved, God looked at the one he didn't. The unloved one, the overlooked one, the one whose own name barely surfaces in the love story, and God moved toward her. He gave the children to the sister nobody chose. And watch what Leah does with each one, because you can read her whole heart in the names. Her first son she names Reuben. The Lord has looked on my affliction, now my husband will love me. Her second, Simeon. The Lord heard that I am hated. Her third, Levi. Now this time will my husband be joined to me. Do you hear it? 3 sons in, and she is still just trying to earn her husband's love. Every baby is another attempt to finally be wanted. It is heartbreaking, but then comes the 4th son, and something in Leah shifts. She names him Judah, and this time she does not say a word about Jacob. She does not say, now he will love me. She says only this, now will I praise the Lord. Something in her has stopped reaching for the love that would not come, and turned toward the God who had been watching her all along. She stops trying to be chosen by her husband, and she praises. Now hold that name, Judah. Remember it, because we are coming back to it, and it is going to break the whole story open. Meanwhile, Rachel, the loved one, the beautiful one, the one who had everything Leah wanted, was suffering the exact wound Leah had been spared. She could not have children, and she was desperate about it in a way that mirrors Sarah generations earlier. "Give me children, or else I die," she cried out to Jacob. It is the same ancient anguish. The beloved wife discovers that being loved is not the same as being fulfilled. She had his heart. She did not have the one thing her world said made her whole. Eventually God remembered Rachel too, and she bore a son and named him Joseph. And you may know where Joseph's story goes: the coat, the pit, the slavery, the rise in Egypt. But that is a story of its own. What matters here is the second son she longed for, because reaching for him is what killed her. She got pregnant again. And on the road south, near a town called Bethlehem, hold onto that name too, she went into a hard labor that she did not survive. As her life slipped away, she named the baby Benoni, which means son of my sorrow. Her last act was to press her grief into her child's name. But Jacob could not let his boy carry sorrow for the rest of his life. So he renamed him Benjamin, son of my right hand. The son of sorrow became the son of honor. And then Rachel died, and Jacob buried her right there by the roadside near Bethlehem, not in the family tomb, but alone, under a pillar he set up to mark the spot. There it is, the road I promised you at the very beginning. The reason the beloved wife is missing from that cave in Hebron. But before we unlock what that means, there is one more thing, one more group of women in this story that almost nobody counts. Because between Leah and Rachel, and around them, the nation of Israel was being built by two more wives entirely. And when you finally count who came from whom, the whole picture turns upside down. There were 4 wives in Jacob's household. Not 2, 4. We remember Leah and Rachel because they had names the story lingers on. But the rivalry between the sisters produced a kind of arms race, and the weapons were other women. When Rachel could not conceive, she did exactly what Sarah had done generations before. She gave Jacob her servant, a woman named Bilhah, and said, "She shall bear upon my knees, that I may also have children by her." And Leah, not to be outdone, gave Jacob her own servant, a woman named Zilpah. And these 2 women, handed over, used as instruments in someone else's competition, bore children too. Now here is the part that should stop you cold. Count the 12 tribes of Israel. The 12 sons, who become the 12 tribes, the foundation of the entire nation, the names carved on the gates of the holy city in the book of Revelation itself. 6 of them came from Leah, the unloved one. 2 came from Rachel, the beloved one. And 4 of them, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher, came from Bilhah and Zilpah. The servants, the women whose feelings the text never records. The wives' history does not bother to describe. The ones you were never taught to name in Sunday school. A third of the nation of Israel, a third of the 12 tribes, descends from 2 women almost no one remembers. Their sons stood at Sinai. Their sons inherited the promised land. Their descendants heard the prophets and waited for the Messiah. And we do not even know what their faces looked like or how they felt about any of it. The covenant did not just run through the barren and the unloved. It ran through the invisible, and this is where it all comes together. Go back to that cave in Hebron. For couples, we said, Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob and Leah, the unloved sister, the tender-eyed one. The wife Jacob got tricked into marrying is the one who lies beside him for eternity in the covenant tomb. And the beloved wife, the beautiful one, the one he wept over at the well and worked 14 years to win, Rachel, is buried alone by a roadside miles away. Do you see what Genesis just did to you? It spent chapters making you love Rachel and pity Leah. And then, at the end, it quietly places Leah at the center of the promise and leaves Rachel by the road. The world's ranking, beautiful, over plain, loved over unloved, chosen over overlooked, gets turned completely inside out. In the book of Ruth, when the whole town blesses a new marriage, listen to which women they name. The Lord make the woman that is come into thine house like Rachel, and like Leah, which two did build the house of Israel. Both of them, together, the builders of the nation. And they named the unloved sister right alongside the beloved one, as equals, forever. But it goes further than a tomb. Remember the name I told you to hold on to? Leah's fourth son, the one she named the moment she stopped trying to be loved and simply praised God. Judah. From Judah comes the tribe of kings. From Judah comes David, and from the line of David, in a town called Bethlehem, the very town where Rachel died reaching for a son she couldn't keep, a different kind of son is finally born. Trace the family tree in the first chapter of Matthew, and it runs straight through Judah, which means the line that leads to Jesus does not run through the wife Jacob loved. It runs through the wife Jacob did not want. The unloved woman, weeping over her babies, certain she would never be chosen, was carrying the line that would lead to the Messiah the whole world was waiting for. She just could not see it yet. Now let that land on you personally for a moment, because this is not only ancient history. Every one of us has stood somewhere in this story. You have been in a room where you were the one who got overlooked. You have been the second choice for the job, for the friendship, for the love you wanted and didn't get. You have done the quiet, unglamorous work that nobody counted, like Bilhah and Zilpah, while someone else got the credit and the story. You have laughed the bitter laugh of Sarah, sure that the good thing was never coming for you. And the entire book of Genesis is leaning across 4,000 years to tell you something about that. The God who wrote this story does not measure the way your family measured, the way the room measured, the way you have measured yourself. He kept reaching, at every single generation, past the obvious choice and toward the overlooked one, not by accident, as a pattern, as a signature, as the whole point. The first-century historian Josephus retold these marriages for a Roman audience, and even he could not smooth them into a tidy legend, the deception, the rivalry, the tangle of wives. He preserved the mess, because the mess is the message. God did not build his promise through a perfect family of chosen women. He built it through the barren, the deceived, the unloved, and the unnamed, real women in a broken household, most of whom never got to see what their yes, and their grief, and their quiet endurance was actually building. You are standing inside the same pattern right now, and you may not get to see what your unseen years are building either. But if the God of Sarah and Rebekah and Leah is the same yesterday, today, and forever, then being overlooked was never the same thing as being forgotten. So what do you take with you when you close the book? 3 things. First, the fact. The covenant of Israel did not run around the wives of the patriarchs. It ran straight through them. Take the women out of Genesis, and there is no Isaac, no 12 tribes, no nation, no line to Bethlehem. Sarah, Rebekah, Leah, Rachel, Bilhah, Zilpah, they are not the supporting cast of the promise. They are the artery it flows through. Read Genesis again, and you will see it on every page now that you know to look. Second, what it means for you. God's largest work in this world has a strange habit of running through the people the room overlooks. Not the loudest, not the most obvious, not the one everyone assumed would be chosen. Over and over, he reached for the woman in the corner, and he is not a different God today. Whatever unseen, uncredited, unglamorous thing you are doing in a season where nobody seems to notice, do not assume it is small in the only ledger that finally counts. And third, the one I most want you to carry out the door. If you have ever been Leah, married to a life that did not choose you back, doing everything you could just to be wanted, certain you were the overlooked one, then hear this. The unloved sister is the one buried at the center of the promise. Her son's name leads to the Savior of the world. She died never knowing that. She spent her whole life thinking she had lost, and she had, in fact, won the thing that mattered most. God saw her when no one else did, and the same God sees you. Being overlooked by people has never once meant being overlooked by him. That cave in Hebron is still there today. You can go and stand outside it. For couples in the dark, for 1,000 years old, and the unloved wife lying in the place of honor, while the world spent centuries feeling sorry for her. Genesis knew exactly what it was doing. So let me ask you before you go. Of all of them, Sarah's laugh, Rebekah's "I will go," Leah's tender eyes, Rachel's road, the two servants no one names, which wife's story hit you the hardest? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. Because the God of the patriarchs was never only the God of the fathers. He was the God of the women the world walked past. And he still is.